Welcome back to Velshi and Rule. New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio is the latest Democrat to throw his hat into the ring to challenge Donald Trump in 2020. De Blasio served for mayor for the last 5 years, previously serving the city as public advocate and as a city council member. As mayor, his policies have focused on Democratic priorities, from universal pre-K, a universal health care proposal, an emission reduction plan, and policing reforms.
But during his administration, critics have attacked him on issues, some that have plagued New York for quite some time: income inequality, homelessness, and the lack of access to affordable housing right here. He has taken fire on infrastructure, as the New York Times found subway on-time rates dropped from 80% and 90% in the mid-2000s to an average of 65% in 2017. And he has faced criticism over his plan to spend more than $1 billion to create 100,000 new jobs. So far, the program has spent $300 million to create 3,000 jobs, according to the city's economic development group, though they note another 16,000 are projected. And these struggles have translated into polling. A new Quinnipiac poll found that Mayor de Blasio has the lowest net favorability among Democratic voters, even polling below President Trump among all voters. Joining us now is New York Mayor and Democratic presidential candidate Bill de Blasio. You knew going into this thing you'd be a little bit polarizing. Do these numbers, do they shock you?
No, it's not where you start, it's where you end. I mean, this is the very beginning of an election. And look, the things that we have done here in this city are things that matter to this whole country. Pre-K for every child for free. Paid sick days for hardworking folks who don't lose a day's pay now when they're sick or their child is sick. Universal health care. That means that uninsured people actually get direct access to a primary care doctor. This is what working people need. And my message is working people first, and that has not been the priority of the federal government. Federal government's on the side of the 1%, not working people. In this city, we've shown what it means to actually stand up for working people and have a government on their side. And I've been blunt about the reality. I say there's plenty of money in this world, and there's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. And I'll tell you, I talk about that all over this country. And every place I go, people appreciate that honesty and they want to see the change.
They appreciate that sentiment without a doubt. But who's your base? Where's your base?
Look, when I ran for mayor of New York City, I got the exact same questions. I ended up winning a Democratic primary, overwhelmingly won the general election with 73% of the vote, won re-election with 67%. I know I can build a broad coalition for change because I'm talking about the needs of working people. I'm backing it up with facts and action. You know, other candidates, a lot of good candidates. But my question is it words or is it deeds? I'm showing actual impact on working people's lives in the largest, toughest city in America.
So is Elizabeth Warren. She's got a very progressive platform and she's got policies.
And I think the world of her. But my point is I've put these policies into action for working people. And we got to be clear about that. When you can make change in everyday people's lives, ask the parents who have pre-K for free for their kids. Ask the folks who have gotten affordable housing. Ask the folks who are not evicted because we got them free legal services to stop an illegal eviction. All of these things changed actual people's lives. Look, I'm chief executive of the biggest, most complex place in this country. We're the #1 terror target in this country, but we also happen to be the safest big city in America. We've achieved that while bringing police and community closer together with neighborhood policing. These are big, tangible things that affect everyday people's lives. And I got to tell you, in Iowa in particular, and you know Iowans pride themselves on being the interviewers for all of America. When I talk to folks about deeds, experience, getting things done, they listen very, very carefully. They want a president who actually knows how to do things for working people.
So one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is income disparity and wealth disparity.
Yes, right? You do, and I thank you for that.
Probably of our world. It is certainly the problem of our country. And this city has a lot of it.
Yep.
This city is ground zero for a lot of great things, but it is also the picture of wealth disparity. There are people who cannot afford, people who serve our city as nurses, as teachers, as firefighters, as police officers who cannot afford to live very close to where we are here in the center of Manhattan. What does New York teach you about what you can go out there and pitch to Americans about how you deal with wealth disparity and income disparity in this country?
That we got to be blunt about the fact that this disparity is going to really undermine this country. It's going to destroy the social fabric of this country if we don't deal with it quickly. And I want to thank you both because you really have focused on this issue in a particular way. So we know that you can lift the floor for working people because when you give them pre-K for their kids or after school for free, when you give them paid sick days, when you give them universal health care, it takes a huge economic burden off them. But here's the other piece of the equation. Higher taxes on the wealthy. I've fought for this for a long time. That's why I say there's plenty of money. If the wealthy were taxed at the level they should be, I hearken back to the Eisenhower administration, that's the kind of wealth taxation of wealth we should have, what they had back during that Republican administration.
Almost 90% marginal tax rate.
But can I just, I want to dine on this pie in the sky, but let's go to New York City. And this idea that let's tax the wealthy. Every rich person I know in New York is feverishly figuring out how do they move their home address so they stop paying taxes here. So when we look historically, whether you're talking the wealthy or corporate America, they've proven that they know how to game the system so they're not going to pay these taxes. How is it that you think, given the influence that the wealthy have, that corporate America has, you can change a system that's the system is actually working. It's working for the wealthy, and it always has. And it does here in New York.
Stephanie, one difference. It's working more for the wealthy and the 1% than it ever has in decades, and that's a dangerous reality.
In New York, too, sir.
Yeah, but here's the problem. I would happily ensure that the wealthy pay their fair share in taxes. That's controlled by our state government, our federal government. You give me the power to do it, we'll do it. But let me tell you something. If you had national legislation to take back, repeal those Trump tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations, put that money back in the hands of working people through things like an infrastructure plan. That's how you change this country. If it's national, then you don't have one locality fighting each other over tax levels. The other thing I want to be very blunt about, to your point, yeah, there are some rich people looking for lower tax jurisdictions. We've also seen a net gain in millionaires in this city, and people actually want to be here and are paying their taxes loyally. So I would say to you, this is a national problem that we got to be blunt about. This status quo can't continue. Here's the thing we have to come to grips with as Americans. This kind of disparity, you talk about a threat to national security, a country in which people don't think the government's on their side anymore. They don't think the next generation will do better than the last one. They don't think they can get ahead no matter how hard they work. When I talk to everyday working Americans, they are struggling. They are scared to death about what one health crisis could do to their family. They don't know if they're going to be able to find enough work to actually pay the bills. Their wages have not been growing. These are things that must be addressed by the federal government. And what do we see in Washington today? We see yet another circus where something that would help us, an infrastructure bill, is suddenly on the back burner because Trump is playing another bait and switch strategy.
Mayor, let's talk about, we're talking about rich people maybe moving to not pay taxes. One of the other issues that we face here in New York City is homelessness. We have a poverty report showing that 141,000 people were lifted out of poverty. That's the good news.
That is the good news.
The Coalition for Homeless found in March 2019 that more than 63,000 people per night slept in one of the city's shelters. That's a 31% increase since 2000. I'm sorry, that's not. I've got my statistics confused, but that is the highest level of homelessness since the Great Depression. That's a problem around this country.
It's a huge problem around the country. The difference is here in New York, we provide shelter to people in need. Now, the number of folks...
That's a distinction that's important. Everybody in New York City is entitled to shelter.
If someone, God forbid, can't afford their housing anymore, ends up on the street, or God forbid, because of a mental health challenge or a substance misuse challenge, they can't hold their lives together, we guarantee that we'll have a roof over their head. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten 100,000 people in the last 5 years out of shelter and into permanent affordable housing. In fact, the number of people in shelter is starting to go down. The number of people who are street homeless is starting to go down. In many other parts of the country, I go there and I'm shocked to see so many people on the streets. We try to address it very differently here. But it's all about income inequality. Again, what happened? Even during the Great Recession, the cost of housing went up in New York, while wages did not. Right. So a lot of people got caught in that squeeze. We have the biggest affordable housing program in the history of New York City. It's going to reach 700,000 people with affordable housing. As I said, we're stopping illegal evictions by getting people lawyers for free. These are things that are being picked up on all over the country, the example that we've set here. But there's a lot more to do, that's for sure.
You said you want to take pre-K, free pre-K for all nationally.
Yes.
Does that mean you're going to make education a core part of your platform? Because beyond pre-K, that's great for 4-year-olds. We've got a failing public education system for kids in the 4th grade, 8th grade, and through high school. And if you care about inequality, you got to care about education.
You're exactly right. And yes, education is the issue I've focused on the most as mayor of this city. And I'll tell you, Look at when children grow and learn the most, between 0 and 5. That's what the science tells us. When does the American education system start full day? At the age of 6. So in fact, I would say the number one thing to do to improve public education in America is reach those pre-K kids, full day, high quality pre-K for free, as we've done here in the nation's largest city. We're actually going to do it for 3-year-olds next. And really double down on that time when kids can learn the best.
While it's failing for 4th graders?
No, listen to what I'm saying. If we're going to make big structural change in this country, if we're actually going to give kids the education they need, if we're going to give everyone a chance to start at the same starting line, if we're going to compete with China and Germany and all the places that invest in education all the time, we've got to start by getting early childhood education right. There's lots of other things to do, including a whole lot more teacher training, making teaching a kind of profession that more and more people choose to go into. We don't have a teacher shortage here in this city. There are major teacher shortages around the country because we constantly uplift our teachers. We treat them as crucial to the future of our city. We give them a lot of support. We give them decent pay. You've seen these teacher movements around the country. I was just down in South Carolina, huge movement down. They're fighting just for basic investments in education.
Yes, while we do all those things, the statistic I was quoting the other day, maybe our control room can put it up. Part of the problem is since the recovery from the recession, or since the end of the recession, we've seen rent go up by about 1/3 in the city, about 31% since 2010. So when you talk about the teachers and you talk about the firefighters and you talk about the police officers, we still have people who earn better and they do better in New York, and they still have trouble living here. So is that ever going to even out in New York and San Francisco and places like that where working people can't live close to their jobs?
Look, we have to change it. There's a lot of ways to change it. I said we have the biggest affordable housing program in the history of the city. It'll get 700,000 people. We have rent regulation, which is something that works, and we're actually going to strengthen it up in our state capitol in the next month. There's a lot of tools we have to help everyday people to live in a city like this. Public housing is another one of it. We're putting a huge investment in public housing, but where are we not seeing help? The federal government is absent on public housing, absent on affordable housing. There is no American affordable housing policy at this moment.
The federal government's going the wrong direction on public and affordable housing.
But think about the magnitude of this, and you guys really look at these big issues. There is literally not an affordable housing strategy for America, whereas the cost of housing is going up in metropolitan areas all over the country. There is not a policy to stop global warming. There's not a resiliency policy. There's not a universal health care policy. There's not a mental health strategy. We are in a country right now, the greatest country in the world, but being governed in a way that doesn't even approach our greatness. We've actually got to have a strategy to address these issues.
We've got a Republican president. One of the reasons he won are those working people that you're talking about, the firefighters, the police officers who said enough is enough, and they went out and voted for him. Are you going to be able to get Republicans to vote for you in the way that he got lifetime Democrats to vote for him?
I'm going to be able to get working people to vote for me, regardless of ideology. No, listen to what I'm saying. Regardless of ideology, regardless of party affiliation. What the Democrats have not done well enough in recent years is be the party of working people. To too many Americans, somehow Democrats became the party of the elite. They did not say boldly, bluntly, we need a government that is for working people first.
Do you want the elite to vote for you?
Listen, here's what I'm trying to say. I want working people to know the government will be on their side. I want working people to know that we will challenge the wealthy and the 1% on behalf of working people. I've done it in New York consistently. That's why we put money back in the hands of working people in all the ways I described. This is what we need to do differently. And my fear always is that Democrats talk about a lot of things except what do working people need. Once everyday Americans...
I know we have to go, but I think people talk about this all the time. People talk about working people all the time. If you're only going to go for that, do you not want to get more people than that to vote for you?
I want the biggest coalition possible, but it has to be based on working people in this country who I guarantee you are not hearing this message clearly enough from the Democratic Party. They need to hear that we will tax the wealthy at the level they deserve. They need to hear we're going to put money back in their hands. When you say universal health care, it means you're acknowledging what most working people go through, even if they have health insurance. What about the deductibles? What about the out-of-pocket expenses? Premiums, co-pays. A lot of people have insurance and they literally can hardly use it because it costs so many ways and so many hidden taxes, side payments. They can't afford to use it. People are working hard, Stephanie. They're working harder, I would argue, than any time in our history. There's more stress in their lives. There's longer hours, but they're not getting anything back for it. When the Democratic Party says squarely, we're going to fix that, we're going to be on the side of working people, that's when we see the kind of coalition build across all party lines, all regions, to win back this country.
We say it all the time, Ali. People aren't political. They just want to live their best life. They want to take care of their families.
Mayor, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Mayor Bill de Blasio.
And an important reminder, MSNBC's Road Warriors and all the Democratic contenders are on the road to Miami for the first Democratic candidates debate of the 2020 election. You do not want to miss it. You can see it here on MSNBC, NBC, and Telemundo.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.